budget crisis, my ass. That would be a completely unnecessary job, even if we weren't in a budget crisis. You're telling me you have to have a doctor dedicated to, again, a handful of prison inmates who believe that they need top surgery, bottom surgery, gender hormone therapy while they're incarcerated on the taxpayer dime. This segment is brought to you by Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. Sick of fad diets that work for a couple months and then you gain all the weight back? Well, I'm down 37 pounds on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program, and I've kept that weight off for more than a year. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at eastsideweightlossclinic.com. It's a total farce. It's an absolute lie for elected leaders to sit here and suggest that we are $10 to now $14 billion in the hole. I mean, we can call it a spending crisis, right? Because that is really what it is. They've spent way too much money. They've spent more money than we have coming in. It's a budget shortfall in the very simplest term. But to me, that's not even it. Because it would be so simple for our state government to craft a budget that is commensurate with the amount of money we have coming in. It would be so simple to do it, but the thing is that they don't want to do it. They don't want to give up some of the real nonsensical stuff that they're spending money on. It would be so simple if we were level-headed and looked at this like, okay, what actually does the government need to be doing? We would have a budget surplus. I mean, you'd be able to give tax breaks to people. But that's not what they want to do, obviously. They want to keep all these dumb things the government should never be paying for in the first place, and then they want to come to you pleading poverty and coming up with all these new taxes that they want to push down. We already know they'll probably adjust the tax on capital gains to apply to more people. They're going to try to pass a tax on high-paying jobs like the city of Seattle has, which will ruin our economy. They want to maybe pass a tax on unrealized gains, which will also decimate our economy just at a more rapid pace. And there's a number of other things that they're proposing because they don't want to actually budget. You know, they're going to propose budgets and craft budgets. But these aren't budgets. These are wish lists and a route to new taxes. That's all it is. So there was a story that came up. Sarah Fox, I'll give undivided viewer Sarah Fox credit for sending me this, although our friend Jason Rance had tweeted it out last week and I just didn't see it, but it's new to us, so I want to talk about it at the top of the show because it just proves this point. So again, $10 to $12 billion budget deficit was the initial estimate when the Office of Financial Management had put out this right after the election. Literally right after the election. You remember, this was November 8th. That's the date on the Office of Financial Management's initial alert that, hey, we have a $10 to $12 billion budget deficit. November 8th. How could we be so duped? November 8th, oh no, we're not in a budget crisis before the election. We'll let them know about after the election, right? So now it's looking like it's maybe more toward $14 billion that they're estimating that we're going to be short. And remember the steps that happened. So they did that after the election. Governor Inslee came out and said, this is an emergency. This is really serious. I'm directing all of my agencies to take immediate cost-cutting measures, including freezing contracts, freezing non-essential travel, freezing all new equipment purchases, and freezing hiring for most positions, which if you're actually facing a budget crisis, those steps make sense. Like, let's stop the hemorrhaging right now while we reassess what we're going to do. The freeze hiring for most positions thing is the one that's going to become very important here because the state of Washington is still posting job openings. And look, there are some job openings and absolutely necessary positions in the state of Washington. Like, I don't want them freezing hiring for the Washington State Patrol, for instance. You know, if you've got a position like jail guards and prison guards in the Department of Corrections, like there are some things that you can't freeze hiring. If somebody leaves, you got to replace them because we need someone to be able to do that job. Here's a job that you would think, given this insistence that we're in a budget crisis, this directive from the governor to all his state agencies, including the Department of Corrections, you must freeze hiring for non-essential positions. So odd then that this would be today an active posting by the state of Washington for the job of gender-affirming medical specialist physician 3. I kid you not. This was posted on December 6th. The closing date, when they're going to consider applicants, is December 19th. So this is a new, very much active job posting from the state of Washington for a gender-affirming medical specialist. What is that exactly? What does that do? So it says that this person would be responsible for directing patient care. God, just end it now. Directing patient care of all transgender individuals statewide in the Department of Corrections. So they're hiring a doctor specifically to take care of transgender prison inmates and their needs. It says, act as a treating consultant for transgender patients in conjunction with the on-site staff. This will include managing assessment for and treatment with hormones and consideration for surgical interventions. They would also participate in the Transgender Care Review Committee, provide professional assessment for consideration of the Care Review Committee for transgender inmates to determine medical necessity for various interventions, to include surgical interventions, which isn't a medical necessity, but of course they believe it is. So let's see, full-time job, permanent job, so it's not a temporary job of any kind that they're hiring for. Here's the salary that you could get paid for being a gender-affirming medical specialist for the state of Washington. $198,000 to $267,000 a year. We are supposed to believe that the state of Washington is in an epic budget crisis, and they're hiring a doctor to take care of the necessary hormones and surgical interventions for a handful of inmates in our prison system to be called a gender-affirming medical specialist. Budget crisis, my ass. That would be a completely unnecessary job, even if we weren't in a budget crisis. You're telling me you have to have a doctor dedicated to, again, a handful of prison inmates who believe that they need top surgery, bottom surgery, gender hormone therapy while they're incarcerated on the taxpayer dime. We already know the taxpayers have spent north of $500,000 on quote-unquote gender-affirming care for transgender inmates. Yes, you're paying for that. So in this budget crisis, in this really tight budgetary time in Washington, you're already footing the bill for prison inmates to get gender hormone therapy and gender reassignment surgery. You've already been footing the bill for that. And now on top of that, they want you to foot the bill to the tune of $250,000 a year for a doctor who's going to essentially provide concierge service to these transgender prison inmates. And on top of, remember the story we did that I always revisit when I talk about our quote-unquote budget crisis? You don't have a budget crisis when you're putting out government contracts for bidding, trying to find people who specialize in laser hair removal to service quote-unquote transgender inmates. Remember we talked about that? This was back on October 24th, the Washington Electronic Business Solutions vendor. So they basically send out all these bids for contract for all sorts of areas of government, try to get people to send in bids where they were looking for laser hair removal services for incarcerated individuals. The Washington State Department of Corrections provides comprehensive health care to incarcerated individuals. The department is committed to providing all individuals with the care and treatment necessary to promote their physical and mental health, including the provision of electrolysis, laser hair removal, to individuals receiving treatment for gender dysphoria. And you want us to, honest to God, believe that we're in a budget crunch. And you're giving prison inmates, in the interest of their physical and mental health, you're sending out government contracts to find someone who will come to prison, and if they won't come to prison, you'll transport the prisoner to a laser hair removal center so they can get their pubes laser hair removed off so they feel more feminine. And they're going to try to convince us over the next 4 months that we are in a serious budget crisis and they have to raise taxes or we're screwed, or our essential services will just go out the window. While they provide laser hair removal to transgender inmates, while they do so at the direction of a brand new gender-affirming medical specialist who exists at $250,000 a year to provide concierge medical care to transgender prison inmates. There is no population of people in the state of Washington who has better medical care than a prison inmate, than a convicted felon who says that they are a different gender other than the one they were born. Unless you are wealthy beyond your wildest dreams, you don't have a concierge medical team that specifically caters to your every need. That's what this is. It's like a celebrity doctor that does house calls. Hey, I believe I'm a woman, so take me out of this more dangerous men's facility, put me in behind lock and key as a man with genitalia intact with women behind bars. Like, I'm serving life, so that's a much better situation for me to be in a women's facility. And while you're at it, I'd like to be squeaky clean down there. So can you send someone in, preferably a woman, to administer laser hair removal on me? And also, can you get my doctor in? I want to talk to them about my needs one-on-one. This isn't hyperbole. I'm not making any of this up. This isn't a culture war leaning into some sort of one-off narrative. This is reality. This is happening in the state of Washington. We're spending millions of dollars on this. And then we're prohibiting the public and the media from filing any sort of public disclosure request to see what's happening with these transgender inmates, who, by the way, have been, according to guards and inmates, accused of impregnating, assaulting, raping, because you can't have consensual sex behind bars. So every act of sex is rape. So they hide all that, and then we have to spend money on this absolute nonsense. And then we're going to be gaslit into, we're not going to be gaslit because they can't gaslight us, but they're going to try to gaslight other citizens into believing that we're in such a severe budget deficit that we either have to cut essential spending, the essential services we all rely on, or we have to be okay with them raising taxes in a way that will decimate our economy. And this is what most Washingtonians voted for. When are we going to wake up? And again, is this probably amounts to a few $1 million a year with the transgender prison nonsense. More than that, if you include other aspects of government where they're offering special services to transgender individuals or DEI stuff, then you're probably talking about tens of millions, or if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So this alone, cutting this isn't going to fill a $14 billion budget deficit. But that's not the point. The point is their priorities and what they believe is essential spending at a time when they're $14 billion in the hole. It's proof that we don't need additional taxes. They need to stop spending money, your money, my money, on stuff like this. And stop believing fundamentally that this is an appropriate use of taxpayer funds. I mean, this is every Democratic lawmaker should be asked on the record by the media. They won't respond to us. Whether they think there should be gender-affirming medical specialists hired in the Department of Corrections, and whether they believe that transgender inmates should be able to leave secure prison facilities and go and get laser hair removal to feel more feminine. I would love every single one of them on the record to tell us whether they believe in this juncture that that's an appropriate use of funds.